I came here to save you.
The year was 1981. I was 11 years old and I went to the movies and I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. Oh my gosh. I was an instantaneous Indiana Jones fan. I wanted to be just like him. I was wanting to be Mississippi Scott, right? In fact, I still love archaeology to this day, so much that whenever I went to college, I even had a double major with one of my emphasis in study being religious and biblical archaeology. I love it. It's a lot of fun. But I'm going to tell you the story of something that happened to me as an 11-year-old after watching that movie about the time that I discovered the crystal treasure. Hi, I'm Scott and welcome to the Powerhouse. I'm so glad that you could join me this week. Yeah, like I said, I was a huge fan. I wanted to be just like him. And at 11 years old, here, especially in the South, it was a very safe time, a very safe place for me to be. And I could get up in the morning and get my stuff together. I'd put on a canteen sometimes, so I would have water and I would head out and I would go into the woods. We would build forts. We would make trails. We would build ramps and jump them with our bikes. We did all kinds of stuff like that. And I have lots of stories about that stuff that I will share. But today I want to share you a story about the time that I wanted to be an archaeologist and I wanted to be just like Indiana Jones.
Genius.
I got my machete, I got my whip. In fact, my whip, this is the real thing. This is a whip that my grandfather made me, a bull whip that he used whenever he was a young man. Yeah, I had this on my side, I had my hat, and I was ready to go out and be an archaeologist and go discover something. Now, in the little area where I live, there are tons of things to discover. And in fact, whenever I set out, I was trying to find arrowheads. There's lots of Indian arrowheads all over the place where I live, and I found a couple of those and whatever. But walking through the woods, and I was by myself. Usually I had friends with me, but this particular day I was by myself. And I was walking through the woods and I happened upon this it looked like a mound of dirt. And whenever I started examining it and getting closer, I was like, oh, this is a tomb, So I go in there and I start peeling back the layers of leaves and pine straw and dirt that had gathered over this mound. I noticed something shining in the sunlight. It was a square glass block. And in fact, this whole stack, this whole pile, this mound was nothing but this huge stack of glass blocks. There were glass blocks that were used in the building of things. Man, in my 11-year-old mind, I had come across the motherlode of crystal discovery. These were diamonds. But little did I know that I would revisit that years later. Some years later, I was in college and my parents were building a new house. And as they were building a new house, my mom made the comment one day. She says, I wish I had some of those glass blocks. I would like to make a wall of glass blocks in the master bathroom. And she said, it'd be really cool if we could find some of those. We need to go check that out. And I said, Mom, I remember about 10 years ago, whenever I found this stack of glass blocks, and I began to tell her about it. My dad was intrigued. He said, really? Are you sure they're there? And I said, I know they're still there. I mean, that's a part of the woods that nobody ever goes into. And he said, well, let's go get one. Bring it here. Let me look at it. So I did. At 20 years old, again, 21 years old, again, I set out on the trail that I had done. And it was probably a mile into the woods, as far as I can remember back where they were. And I went back into those woods and I found the same pile. And I did that. I brought him back a beautiful example. Of course, it was covered in dirt, but it was glass. When you cleaned it off, it shined and it sparkled and it looked brand new. And he was amazed. He said, we got to find out who owns that land. So my dad did some research. He found out who owned the land, and come to find out what it was is there's a military base that was built for Camp Shelby. Camp Shelby was a training camp that was purchased by the state of Mississippi in 1934, and it's been used ever since to train military people from all over the world. it was a World War II training camp in particular. And where I live right now, I live on a street called Old Rifle Range Road. And it was the old rifle range of that camp in pre-World War II days. There are people out here all the time with metal detectors, and they're scanning the ground and trying to dig up, old belt buckles and old buttons off of uniforms and stuff like that all the time. They use these blocks to make walls in some of the barracks of the space. And whenever some of these blocks were left over, one of the guys who owned this land took a load of these blocks and put them there with the intention of using them one day to build a house way back in the woods. And he had died, and some of his family now owned the land. And my dad made a comment to them, said, we'll pay you for these blocks. And they were like, no, man, you can have them. Just take them. We'll never use them. Go ahead and have them. So he did. I went down for a mile with a great big wheelbarrow, and I filled it up with these blocks and brought it back. And I think I did that 2 or 3 times to get enough of them back. But now in the house that was built, my parents don't live there anymore, but there is still these 2 big tall windows that are built out of these glass brick blocks. And it's beautiful. One of my friends on Facebook made a comment the other day that he knew someone whose mother passed away. And he had recently been through his own experience of his mother passing away. So he was able to encourage and help his friend of his because of what he had been through. It's a lot like those glass blocks. There are things that happen in our life that at the time, we make them into things that they're not. Like I made those glass blocks into being a crystal treasure when they were really just simple glass blocks that you would build a window out of. But in my mind, it was a crystal treasure. Whenever I went through my father passing away, this was a terrible, terrible time for me. And I can tell you that in my mind, it was a complete and utter loss. I could see no positive coming from it. It's even hard to think about now. My friend, when he lost his mother, he could see no possible good coming from what was going on, because as he was going through it himself and he had to live that existence with what happened with his mom, taking care of her and seeing her finally come to the end of her life. Whenever he was going through that himself, he could see no good in it at the time until one day someone else was going through the same thing. And suddenly God did a Romans 8:28 miracle. Now, we love to look at Romans 8:28, and let's look at that verse together. We know that God works all things together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. Now, it's very easy for us to misread that and say, we know that everything that happens to people who love the Lord will be good. That's not the truth. God never promises us a rose garden. God never gives us a promise of a crystal treasure. But he does promise us that at the end of our days, we will be rewarded. So we do have that promise. We have that promise that we can keep down in our heart forever. No matter how bad our days get, no matter how difficult the times are we're going through today, we know that one day we will be rewarded. However, God is able to do a Romans 8:28 miracle to those times that we can see no possible positive benefit. We can see him do a Romans 8:28 miracle. He did it in the life of my friend just this week. My friend says, I never thought that I would be able to help someone the way I helped my friend that went through this, because I had gone through it myself.
Come on.
In 1 Thessalonians 4:13, it says that we don't grieve like everyone else who has no hope. That passage of scripture right there is very simple in saying that we go through things differently than everyone else does. And people see that and they recognize that. And when we're going through painful times, when we're having people treat us bad, when we are going through the grieving process, we are not without hope. And even when we don't understand, even when we're just really dealing with pain in our own life, we know that God can do a Romans 8:28 miracle. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. Not all things are good. Not all things are fun. Not all things are pleasant. But even the bad times, even the painful times and the hurtful times can be used by God to accomplish His good work, not only in us, but in those around us. He wants to take the archaeologist in you that discovered the crystal treasure years ago, and he wants to use your experience in the past to be the building blocks of the foundation of someone's present.